Hey, welcome back. If you are new to business or you have this great idea and you're really hoping to turn it into a business, I have a very important question for you. I need you to dig deep and get realistic here. Do you have the confidence in your skills and ideas that you know 100% exactly what your customers are going to need? Now, the obvious answer is no, because you are not your customers, right? So I kind of want us to have a conversation where we can get a little bit realistic here and real with ourselves that, your business is not going to be perfect out of the gate. And that can be a tough pill to swallow because obviously we think our idea is good enough and we have the confidence in it to start this business. We think that, things are going to be perfect and, there's going to be just a ton of customers just flocking to our idea or our product or our service, right? And that may come, but the odds of it being exactly what you thought it was going to be are really, really slim. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect right out of the gate. The cool thing is your customers will tell you what they want. You just have to be willing to listen. And so really what matters the most, maybe even more than your initial idea, is your ability to listen and then adapt and evolve. Now, if you're not willing to pivot and you're not open to hearing feedback, then you're really risking, wasted time and money and maybe even the entire business. I want to stress that pivoting does not equal failure. It's actually just a shift based on new information, feedback, and results. And truly the most successful businesses, didn't end up where they thought they would. And the business, when they reach this, pinnacle of success, probably doesn't look at all like it did when it started and the initial plan that they had. And some really great examples of that come from some of my biggest mentors, the people that I follow and respect and admire. Mark Ford, also known as Michael Masterson, that's his pen name when he writes books, wrote a really great book called Ready, Fire, Aim. And a direct quote from him in that book is, get your product out there quickly and improve it based on customer feedback. Don't try to perfect it first. And the same idea is echoed through a lot of mentors, a lot of really successful people. In a book called The $100 Startup by Chris Guillebeau, he says, start fast, refine as you go. Even Napoleon Hill, the legend, said, a quitter never wins and a winner never quits. But winners also adapt to reality. You see, pivoting is winning with self-awareness. And I bring up this topic because I've had that personal experience, and it really was kind of an eye-opening moment for me, and definitely eye-opening to kind of self-reflect and look back on what happened with one of my biggest early businesses that I started, where I started a shuttle business. And basically the idea was to create a really affordable way for local mountain bikers and then skiers and boarders in the winter to get up to Whistler. And so it was basically a discount service. I did a lot of research. I had already actually operated a shuttle business. And so I kind of had some idea of what I was doing, and I did some market research, and I really thought that I was just improving upon the model that I had initially worked for as an employee. I thought that I was just making it better, and there was definitely demand. And truly, I figured that I had the real world experience, but in hindsight, I still got it wrong, because it turned out that the interest just wasn't there, and because of that, the money wasn't there. So it turned out, much to my surprise, customers didn't want shuttles. They actually wanted private premium charters. And so when people started calling me asking for private charters, thankfully I listened. And I mean, if I'm being honest, I didn't have much of a choice. I was pretty desperate at that time because I had poured my entire life savings into buying a bus and all the other infrastructure that needed to go with this. I mean, buying a bus is no small feat. And I was just bleeding money. Every time I showed up for one person who was, who wanted this shuttle service, that was 23 seats that were empty, and I was still making the trip all the way to Whistler. So it was costing me just a ton of money. So a bit of desperation, but thankfully I listened because, I was able to pivot. And by turning into a charter bus, a private service, I was able to charge a much higher price, a premium price. I offered a way better service. It was more custom tailored. It was one-on-one. It was me just, working with groups, sharing my experience, sharing what I knew about the local area for living there for 26 years. And by providing that, I was able to build customer loyalty, which was crazy. Even though most of my customers were coming from overseas, they were coming back, and they were coming back to me. It was amazing. And so really in hindsight, the key lesson here is that if I had clung to the original idea that I had that I thought was so good, it was going to be shuttles. Everybody wants shuttles, right? They want a cheap service. Otherwise, they're going to drive themselves, right? If I'd clung to that original idea, that the business would have died. It absolutely would have died. I had so much invested in it. And, I think the point here is to make sure that when you start a business or you're in a business, don't fall in love with the model, fall in love with solving a problem. You might even find that the problem you set out to solve is not the actual problem people need solved. So fall in love with solving a problem and be open to hearing feedback and pivoting based on kind of what you're hearing, right? Now, I kind of had the same experience more recently where I started my current business, a marketing firm. And, when I launched that, I provided, really high level marketing campaigns, based around, social media advertising and things like that. But after speaking to people, I was starting to notice there's this huge portion of the entrepreneurial market that, they're small businesses and they didn't need Flash. They and didn't even have the money for Flash, even if they wanted it, so they've truly needed just kind of follow-up help and services at a small scale price. They could really only afford more of a DIY marketing approach. So basically I saw this opportunity where, AI is becoming this big thing, and there's a lot of really great AI tools, and I was able to offer that, something that I never thought I'd be able to do when I started the business. AI wasn't even, a big thing at the time. So basically listening to what a big portion of these business owners that I was talking to, what they were saying, I was able to identify these services and provide it to them at a really reasonable rate, because I was able to buy a kind of a package deal on a service and then piece it out to my clients. And the clients have been really relieved. It's it solved their real problem. It was affordable, and it's actually allowed me to scale quicker. So in this situation, pivoting has really kind of helped me narrow my focus while increasing retention and still delivering real value, right? So again, the customers told me what they needed. I just had to listen. But there's a lot of really, really big names, big companies out there that have gone through the same sort of thing. Like, Netflix, for anybody kind of old enough to remember, they actually started as a mail order DVD service. So you would order a DVD, rent a DVD, and they'd mail it to you. And thankfully they pivoted to streaming, before it was really mainstream, and now everybody knows them as the streaming service. A lot of people don't even remember that they did DVDs. Slack is another one. Slack actually started as a chat tool for a failed video game. The game didn't work out, but the chat service that they had built within that seemed so strong, and there seemed to be a market for it, that they actually pivoted and doubled down on that chat service. And now I think a lot of people, myself included, until I did the research, didn't even realize that Slack had been anything other than a chat service, right? So or a messaging service. And I heard recently they sold for like 27 billion. Like, how amazing is that? YouTube's another one. YouTube originally started as a dating site, believe it or not. You're gonna have to look that up if you don't believe me. It sounds crazy, right? And it just happened that so many people were posting kind of random things on there, and they basically ended up pivoting to kind of an open video sharing. And of course, now they're the biggest video platform on earth. And really all these kind of had the same thing in common. They listened and they responded, and they didn't protect the original idea at the expense of growth. And I think the big lesson there is that failure to pivot can equal death, right? On the flip side, and kind of going back to the Netflix example, Blockbuster, what was the biggest video rental service for years and years and years, they kind of laughed at Netflix, and they refused to adapt. And where are they now? There's one store left in like the whole world. The company's gone. It was massive, and now it's nothing. And Kodak, crazy example, they invented the digital camera, but they were so all in on their original film cameras that they kind of buried the digital concept because they didn't want it to hurt their film business. It seems crazy to even say this, but in the end, they filed for bankruptcy. They couldn't pivot and adapt and see the future, essentially. Businesses definitely not rewarded by stubbornness. It rewards responsiveness, I think. So if to kind of wrap this up, if there's any sort of final advice here, I would say that just exercise caution. You don't want to just build something and then hope people will love it. You need to build what people already want and then make it better. The customer's feedback is by far your most valuable business plan, because your customer is your most valuable asset in a business, right? So you need to be willing to listen to them. And if you're not listening to them, then you're not growing. So that pretty much wraps it up. I hope that gave you something to think about, and probably continue to think about as you go through business, because it's not just a single phase. You may encounter this time and time again through a business. You may go through a few iterations as the world changes and as your customers change and technology becomes available or changes as well. So I guess it's something you want to be constantly doing as you run business, and constantly looking for that feedback and making changes as necessary. So question for you: what pivots have you made in your business or in your life, and kind of how did that affect you, and in hindsight, how would that have gone had you not made those changes? Have you ever ignored feedback and paid the price? Drop a comment, share it, let's talk about it. And if you're just starting your business, don't fear the pivot. Be proud of your ability to grow, and keep up the great work. Proud of all of you, and we'll see you in the next one.